Hi everyone, happy Monday. I am Radhika. Welcome back to Data Zard. Today we are going to be solving Workout Wednesday 2022 Week 18 challenge, and we're going to be remaking a Tableau budget burn down chart, and we're going to be recreating this visual. So without further ado, let's jump into our Power BI desktop. As always, let us start by getting data into Power BI. Data is available on data.world website. Link is already given in the challenge. I have already downloaded the data and it is in the form of a CSV file. So I'm going to go to get data and choose text by CSV and then choose my file and click on open. I will click on transform data and the Power Query editor will open up. In Power Query editor, let us just rename this file to Superstore. Rename this table to Superstore. Rest of the things they look fine, and I'll just get date table because we are going to be doing some calculations which will require us to use date functions, and for that date table will be needed. If you have previously watched my videos, then you would know that I always get my date table from the Enterprise DNA website. So I'm just going to go to that website and copy this data, so the full credit goes to them for this M code for date table. I'm just going to copy this and paste it in my Power BI desktop. So I'll just go into new sources, click on blank query, and then I'll go to advanced editor. And in here, I'll paste that M code that I have copied from the Enterprise DNA website and click on done. Now we need to choose the dates here, start date and the end date. So our data starts from 2020 and ends at 2023. So I'll say 1st of January 2020 as the start date and 31st of December 2023 as the end date, and I'll click on invoke. This will invoke the function and create the date table. I will call this as date and click on close and apply. Now that the data has been loaded into our Power BI desktop, let's go to model view so that we can connect these two tables. The connection would be based on the date column in the date table and order date in the superstore table. So I'll join these two tables, like I'll connect these two tables, and this will be a one-to-many relationship, and make this relationship as active and click on save. Now let's go back to our dashboard. And in here, I'm going to create another table where I will be storing all the measures. There are a few that are required, so I'm going to do that in a separate table. So I'll click on enter data and then write key measures as the name of the table and click on load. Now the first measure that I'm going to create will be a today measure because this challenge was done in 2022 and today is 2025, and we want to replicate what is there in the challenge, like what is shown in the challenge. That's why I'm going to make Power BI suppose that today is 5th of May 2022 because that's when the challenge was posted. So I'll right click on key measures table and click on new measure, and I will call this today, and that will be equal to, I'm going to use date function here. So 2022 as the year, 5 as the month, and 05 as the date. The next measure that I'm going to create is the total budget measure. And for that, I'm going to right click on key measures table and choose new measure. And I will call this total budget. And that will be equal to sum of the budget column in the budget table. Now we would also need a budget where the budget value is constant, because if we put this budget right now in a table, then its value would change depending on the filter context. But we want to remove all the filter context and just have one constant value, which is the total budget displayed. And to do that, I'm going to create another measure and I will call this total budget overall. That will be equal to, we need to use calculate function as we need to change the context here, and we need to change the context for the total budget function, total budget measure. So I'm going to choose total budget. Now we need to remove context that will be coming from the date table because we'll be having date in our visual coming from the date table. So I'll say remove filters and give the date table here and close off all the brackets, so that even if our visual contains anything from the date table, this total budget overall value will be a constant value displayed throughout. This will make more sense when we will get the data in a visual. Let's create the measures first of all. Now the next measure is the total budget used measure. So I will call this total budget used. In total budget used, it's mentioned that it should be the cumulative sum of the budget column up to the selected date. So let's say if we have data for 2020, 2021, and 2022, and we are figuring out this total budget used for 2022, then it should be sum of 2020 and 2021 and 2022 budget. So sum up till that date. It's also mentioned that budget in future dates from today should not be included in total budget used. So, for this, we will first need to know what today's date is, and we have already created a measure which is today for that. And then we will need to understand via DAX if the date is greater than today or less than today, and then we will have to change the behavior of the measure accordingly. And I'm going to right click on key measures and choose new measure, and I will call this total budget used. That will be equal to, first we need to understand if the date is less than or greater than today's date. So for that I'm going to create a variable and call it last visible date. That will be equal to, if the today measure that we have created is less than max of the date present in the date context, then we want today's date. Otherwise, we need the max of date. Then next we want to create a variable to see what is the first visible date in the context. So for that, I will say first visible date, and that will just be equal to the minimum date in the date context. So minimum of this date. Now the next variable that we need is the last date with budget. So I'll say last date with budget will be equal to, we need to change the filter context. So let's do calculate. We need to calculate max of the order date which is present in Superstore table such that we don't have any context on this. And to do that, we can just do remove filters, and we want to remove all the filters. And lastly, then we can return the result, and the result would be if our first visible date, that is a minimum date in the date context, is less than or equal to last date with budget, then we want to calculate the total budget, not the overall budget, but just the budget. And then we can give in the date. I'm just applying the cumulative sum concept. So cumulative date is less than equal to last visible date. And then I'll close off all the brackets. First, we are identifying whether the date, today's date, is less than the maximum date. Then we are identifying what is the minimum visible date. Then we say what is the budget, last date with budget. And then we are saying if the first visible date is less than the last date with budget, then we can do the sum of the budget, where the date is less than the last visible date, which is this one. Next, we need to find the remaining budget, and it is already mentioned in the challenge that it is the difference of the total budget overall and the budget used. So I'll call this remaining budget. That will be equal to total budget overall minus the total budget used. Next, we need to find estimated budget, and that is equal to the amount of budget remaining if budget used were spread evenly across selected frames. Let's go back to our Power BI desktop, and I'll create a new measure and call this estimated budget. And that is equal to, first we need to understand what is our minimum date when the sale happened, like when we have budget for, and what is the maximum date that we have budget for. And for that, I'm going to create two new variables. I will call this min sales date. That is equal to, we can use calculate function again here, calculate the minimum of order date from the superstore table, and then we need to change the context. So the context would be where all selected, so whatever we have in the context, all selected superstore. So what is the minimum order date in the selected context? Similarly, we will find the max sales date in the selected context. So again, I'm going to use calculate function, and this time instead of min, we are going to use max of the order date from the superstore table, where we have all selected superstore. So whatever context is coming from superstore, you keep it and then find out what is the max order date. Next, we need to understand how many days have passed between the minimum sales date and whatever the date we are at right now in the context. So I will call this days passed, and that will be equal to date difference between minimum sales date and whatever is maximum date coming from the date context. And we need to get that in day, close the brackets. So this is the number of days that have passed. Then we find out what is the total number of days. So total number of days, again we'll use date diff, and we'll subtract the minimum sales date because that's when we have sales, and the maximum sales date. So this is the range in which the budget is present. And again, this would be at the day level. And now we need to figure out what is the daily budget. And I'm again going to create a variable here, which is daily budget. That will be equal to whatever our total budget is overall, so that we don't have any filters on it, divided by the total number of days that we have calculated above using this expression. And now all we need to do is return the daily budget multiplied by total days minus the days that have already passed. Now the last measure that we need to create is the difference from estimated budget. So I will call it difference from estimated budget. That will be equal to the remaining budget minus the estimated budget. Now we need to create a line chart. So for that, I'm just going to choose line chart and stretch it all across. On x-axis, I'll get end of month, and then on y-axis, I will get remaining budget and estimated budget. Just need to customize this a bit. So we don't want the x-axis title and y-axis title. So I will go into formatting pane, go into x-axis and turn off both these titles. Then in title, we want sales budget burn down. Then going into legend, we want it at the top left corner, but we want line and the marker. And going into lines, for remaining budget, we want a solid line, and the color of line should be. And then going into markers, for the remaining budget, show for this series, we want this marker type, but let's just reduce the size to 3 pixels. Color of marker should be the same as the color of the line. Then going into the estimated budget, it should be a dashed line, and it should be gray in color, so I'll choose dark gray. We don't want the legend title, so I'll just turn that off. Now at the top, we need a text. So for that, I'll go into home, go to text box, and then I'll say data as of, and then we can add value. So going into dynamic value, I will say today because that's what the measure name is. Let's search for today, and I will choose this. Let's choose this particular date format and click on save. So that's today's date. Then we need to put in total budget, that will be equal to, again going into value, choosing dynamic value, and this is total budget overall, and this is a currency value, so I'll choose currency. We don't want any decimal places, so putting this to 0, and then I'll click on save. I'll format this as bold, and lastly we need remaining budget. Again choosing dynamic value, and this is remaining budget. This is also a dollar value. We don't want any decimal places, so I'll put 0, and click on save. And we need this in the same pink color that we have selected for our line. I'll just increase the size of these text so that it is visible clearly. Let's choose 16, and I will put these on the right hand side. Now it is mentioned that in the tooltips we need 4 things. So let me just choose this visual, and we already have remaining budget and estimated budget. We need difference from estimated budget. So let's get that. So this is difference from estimated budget in tooltip, and also total budget unused. So now when we hover over it, we see all these 4 things. We also want a vertical line. So if I bring back the challenge, currently we are trying to create this chart. So this is what we are getting right now. We have to put this current line as per the today's date, and then shade the area which is after the current date. So for this, I will go to this visual again, go to reference line. Reference line, I will do add line, and the type of line is x-axis constant line, and its value would be, let's choose fx field value, and that will be equal to the today measure that we have created, and click on OK. So now we have this vertical line. I'll just put it as a gray color, and now we want shaded area, so I'll turn on the shaded area, but we want it after the line, and shaded area should again be this gray color, and we want the date label as well. We want it on the right hand side, so I'll choose right, and we want it as name, and we'll just have to change the name, so I will write here future, and select this, and this is how the final visual looks like. I hope you have learned something new from this one. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next one.